to get into Formula One, and my break came with McLaren, which happened to be one of the top teams, So I was very fortunate to spend 10 years at McLaren as a mechanic and engineer, into team management as well, and worked with some amazing people. I've got a list of drivers that I was lucky to be there through a fortunate period where we were successful. So it was Mika Häkkinen, David Coulthard, Kimi Räikkönen, who I worked with for a long time, Lewis Hamilton, Fernando Alonso. So it's an amazing list of drivers, but even beyond the drivers, the people at the team were also incredible. So
A couple of weeks ago, I came to your room, I remember, and you were reading an article and you weren't getting a lot of pop-up ads. How?
It's called NordVPN. Been using it for a while now.
Okay, backtrack.
Yep.
Why do you use a VPN?
I mean, for quite a few reasons. Number one, it protects all my information while I'm surfing the web from third-party cookies and you never know, unknown people. Then the second thing is when you are traveling, or whether even you're just out in a coffee shop and you're on an open Wi-Fi network, all your data can be stolen if it's not encrypted and a hidden IP address. So those are two main reasons. And when I travel, I love watching shows. So I have to turn on that VPN and watch my favorite shows.
I love that. I mean, I know you're a big Marvel fan.
Huge.
So those shows help. And did you know, by the way, with NordVPN in particular, there's some very exclusive benefits that you don't get with other providers, whether 5,800 servers that NordVPN has, the ability to service over 60 countries around the world, and reliable encryption.
Whoa.
The encryption software that NordVPN uses is used by governments, national agencies around the world.
Wow.
Think about that now in the hands of consumers. That's pretty powerful.
Yep. And you can get an exclusive NordVPN deal using our link at www.nordvpn.com/tracklimits. And it's a risk-free with 30-day money-back guarantee.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the Track Limits podcast presented by Formula Addict. I'm your host Swish. I'm with my co-host Henny. Today we have a great guest. We're in Bicester. Bicester?
I
think I pronounced it
Bicester,
right.
yeah.
Bicester?
you got it.
You got it. All right, lovely. It's an incredible guest, a person who's been a former engineer at McLaren, an individual who's had a successful TV career, written an autobiography, and is also the voice of the engineer in F1 2022. Welcome, Marc Priestley.
Yeah, welcome.
Thank you, guys. Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate you coming all the way to Bicester.
Yes, love it. No, thanks for having us. I think, you're so busy right now. Obviously, you're on shoot right now. Tell us a little bit. Is it pretty hectic this time of the year?
It's crazy busy, but, all in a good way. I mean, I'm very fortunate. I love what I do. Today I've been, racing a car around a racetrack all day for fun, and someone's been paying me to do it.
Can't complain.
It's incredible.
Epic.
Yeah, I'm never going to take that for granted. So, yeah, it's good.
So in the next kind of 40, 50 minutes, I really want to unpack parts of your life. We break up our entire podcast into Q1, where we talk about things related to racing, Q2, very much diving into you as a professional, and then Q3, the rapid fire round.
We get spicy.
Yeah.
Sounds like pressure. Yeah, let's do it.
You ready to get into Q1?
Let's go, yeah.
Perfect. First question, in about 30 seconds, 45 seconds, tell us about some of the core accomplishments you're proud of as a person.
This is always hard because I hate talking about myself like that. But I guess most people would know what I've done from a motorsport perspective, which is, I guess, the highlight of my career is working at McLaren. It was always a dream for me to get into Formula One, and my break came with McLaren, which happened to be one of the top teams, So I was very fortunate to spend 10 years at McLaren as a mechanic and engineer, into team management as well, and worked with some amazing people. I've got a list of drivers that I was lucky to be there through a fortunate period where we were successful. So it was Mika Häkkinen, David Coulthard, Kimi Räikkönen, who I worked with for a long time, Lewis Hamilton, Fernando Alonso. So it's an amazing list of drivers, but even beyond the drivers, the people at the team were also incredible. So I've been very, very fortunate. So yeah, McLaren in Formula One is my main thing. And then from that, and it's all linked to that, I've had this TV career that you talked about and the various other things, but it all stemmed from that stint in Formula One.
Yeah. And what does your day-to-day look like right now?
Today, I spend most of my time filming a TV show, a car-based TV show called Wheeler Dealers on Discovery Channel. That takes up a lot of my time. And the other half of my time, I guess, is spent talking about the things I've learned in Formula One, both on my own podcast and also to a corporate audience. So I spend a lot of time traveling the world, seeing corporations and big companies and teaching them some of the lessons that I've learned about how to be better in teams, how to work in teams, how to look for this marginal gains that Formula One is sort of famous for, attention to detail, and all of the little sort of nuanced lessons that I've picked up over 10 years at McLaren that can apply to other people and businesses to help them succeed, I guess.
Yeah.
Incredible. And then during your time in McLaren, how long were you there for?
10 years.
10 years. I'm guessing your role evolved.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about what your role entailed at the beginning, what it kind of evolved into.
Yeah, so my role evolved a bit as Formula One evolved. So back when I first started, there were things called test teams. So it was a dedicated test team, right? So every team had their own test team, or the big teams at least. And I got my break in that. So I became what they called a number 2 mechanic in the test team. Never went to races for the first year. It was just going through racetrack to racetrack, but never the actual race events. And we had our own mechanics, our own engineers, our own cars, trucks, the whole garage setup was all identical to the race team, but we went there ahead of the races to pound round and round, doing lap after lap with our own drivers sometimes as well, just to learn about the car and to test things and try components and basically trying to break the car and trying to make it as fast as possible so that when they did get to the race event, all those things were all sorted out in advance.
Yeah. And what does it feel like to be part of a pit crew? I know we watch it on TV when it's race weekends, but what does that energy feel like when you were part of it?
It's amazing. It is amazing. And the next stage after what I just talked about there, the test team, was eventually I got moved onto the race team. And with that comes the responsibility of being on the pit crew. And that really was my dream since I was a kid. That's why I wanted to be in Formula One. It wasn't as many kids were to be a driver. I kind of wanted that probably when I was really small, but very quickly realised that I didn't have that ability. As soon as you go karting with a real racing driver, you realise no matter how good you think you are, you're not that good. So my dream was to be part of a pit stop crew, and then I got that opportunity. And the only way I can describe it, it's actually a really difficult thing to describe, because there's so many emotions and senses that are just off the scale, and the whole thing lasts for 2 seconds. But in that moment, you've got the incredible adrenaline rush. Back then, the noise was, those V10s were just mind blowing. They would rattle you to bits. It wasn't just the noise; it was the feeling of shaking your bones. So you'd have all of that. You'd have the heat coming off the brakes, man. There was just. Sometimes, even though you got a fire suit on, it would still be burning you. You're that close, and the exhaust is red hot. Everything's glowing. Sometimes the brakes are on fire. You take the wheel off, and there's flames. Jeez. You don't have to worry about that. You bung the wheel back on, and off it goes. And of course, on top of all of those things, you've got the pressure of knowing that your race is dependent on what you do in those few seconds. And there are hundreds of millions of people watching you do it, that also are fans of your team and your driver and will be heartbroken if you mess it up.
Oh, yep.
So that pressure, together with all of those senses and emotions, that's the best way I can describe it. But it's still to this day the thing I miss most about being part of the team.
Yeah, and I bet when you see people, fans typically think the driver is at the end of the day what really matters in terms of a race victory, but it isn't, right? It's really a team sport at the end of the day.
100%. And, that's what my sort of second career that I just touched on there, that's what it's all been built on, because you flick the telly on a Sunday and you watch the race and all the focus is, of course, on the driver. They're the guys that get interviewed. They're the guys that are on the top step of the podium when they win. But there's no way they can do that without the thousands of other people that are working away in all the factories, back at base and in the garages at the track itself. And so that was really what my biggest eye-opening moment was, when over those 10 years, or the biggest thing that I learned and sunk in was that it's about everybody involved, and everybody from the guy that's designing the car to the guy driving the car to the guy who puts it together, the guy in the R&D department who's never seen a racetrack in his life because he only ever works in that part of the building. They're all crucial. Every one of them is crucial. And it's an easy thing to sort of say, well, the driver's the most important. It depends which way you look at it, because if that guy in R&D doesn't do his job, the car doesn't end up being as good as it should be, and the driver doesn't get the chance to win. So I firmly believe that everyone's as important as each other. And every job has to be given the same level of importance, because if you fail at any one of them, the whole stack of cards comes tumbling down, And that's what I now go, and I believe that's the same in life. I believe that's the same in, every sort of thing we do, whether it's business to personal accomplishments. You've got to trust the people around you. You've got to be good at every part of it, so it's like a metaphor for life, I guess. And that was the biggest thing I learned.
Incredible. And what was that transition like from going to being a mechanic to then managing a Formula 2 team? Like, what are the differences in terms of that kind of role and your responsibilities overall?
Yeah, so during the 10 years at McLaren, I moved from being this number 2 mechanic on the test team to getting onto the race team. And then over the years inside the organisation, I moved up to managing people within the Formula 1 team as well. And then when I left Formula One after that 10-year spell, I then took on this role of managing a Formula 2 team. And it wasn't a Formula 2 team like now. This was the old Formula 2 where it was a kind of centrally run thing. So I was running the team that ran the championship. So there was I was managing kind of 40 to 50 people. Wow. So big change in that sense, but it was still motorsport. And like I just touched on there, it's just people.
Yeah.
And it's just about, transferring that exact same philosophy. And those 50 people, you had to get them to buy into the things that I've learned from Formula One, where everything matters, details matter. It's about doing that every single thing you do to the very best ability you can with what you have around you. And that, I think, applies to anything, like I said. So I was able, over the course of my time in the Formula 2 operation, to transfer a lot of those things. And I firmly believe as a result of that, the whole team got better, the operation got better, and hopefully a lot of those people went away with similar learnings that I came out of Formula One with.
Wow. And this might be a hot take, but who is your favorite driver that you've ever worked with?
Well, my personal favorite, you see, one of the biggest questions I always get asked is who's the best Formula One driver of all time? And that's an impossible one. And I can only ever judge it on who I've worked with, because that's the only way. When people judge from the outside and they say this guy was the best ever, Schumacher, Senna, whoever it might be, you can't judge that just from results. I know that's how Formula One works, and it's a very results-driven industry, of course. But there's so much more to any one of those drivers. So my take on this is always, I'll judge it on what I saw. So yes, the results matter, but there's a lot more behind the scenes that most people don't get to see. And I got that opportunity with a lot of great drivers. Kimi Räikkönen was, almost certainly the fastest driver over a single lap that I've ever worked with in his prime, around the mid-2000s with us. And he often dragged results out of a car that I knew didn't really deserve to be that quick. He was that good. But he wasn't the most complete Formula One driver. And I think if you look at that, and that's probably how I would have to judge this, I'd look at Lewis and Fernando, and actually at the time I worked with them both, very difficult to split them. And I say that because they looked at every aspect of their role and tried to maximize it. And Kimi probably didn't do that. I think he'd accept he didn't do that as well. He loved the bit in the car. Yeah. Loved racing, almost hated everything else. And he had enough talent and ability to just do that, get in the car and deliver some incredible results, became a world champion. But Lewis and Fernando, multiple world champions, and that's no surprise to me because they never stopped looking for an advantage and that's looking through data until late into the night. It's building the team around them. And I think the very best drivers do that. And that, again, and I don't want to keep saying this all the way through, but that is the same philosophy for life. If you want to succeed in business, you can't just look at the sort of job description on your business card or whatever and maximize that, but you've got to think about what else can you use to your advantage? How can you make the people around you better and stronger? How can you build leaders in your team that are going to support you and help you? And it's all of those things, utilizing data, utilizing the sort of science or materials or whatever you might have at your disposal. How do you maximize everything? And I think that's what Lewis and Fernando both did very well.
Yeah. And you also turned over from managing a team to becoming a presenter for Formula E and Formula One. What was that experience like for you?
It was amazing. And I'll tell you why it was amazing, because when I left the engineering side, the mechanical side of Formula One, I didn't really have a major plan. I'd done it for 10 years. There's a huge amount of travel, of course, involved in that, a huge amount of sacrifice to your personal life. I had young children and I just couldn't be on the road that much. Formula One their calendar was getting longer and longer. It meant more time away. And so I took the decision after we won the championship with Lewis, and that felt like the perfect moment. If you were ever going to step away, that was the time. So I took the decision to step away, but didn't really have a major plan. And it was so first I started writing on my own kind of blog, just a few sort of insights from my time in the sport. And it was the producers of the BBC Radio 5 broadcast around Formula One that picked up on some of my writing and asked if I wanted to go along and try and be a pit lane reporter. And I thought, well, I'd never thought of this before, but I thought, I'll give it a go. Why not? I'm kind of often like that. I'll just say yes and then figure it out later. So anyway, I went along to the British Grand Prix with the BBC, not knowing what to expect. And they just threw me in with a sort of microphone and a recording pack and said, off you go into the paddock and see what you can talk to. I obviously knew a lot of people, so that was an advantage. And off I went. And I met a load of people on that first day. They were all terrible interviews. I was so nervous. probably asked terrible questions.
Like us, right?
But
can't be Lord.
But I got to the end of that day at Silverstone, and I remember phoning my wife saying, I've just discovered what my new career is. You know, I loved it that much. And it was a real eye-opener because I'd never planned it. I'd never thought of it. And actually, when I was on the other side of the pit lane in the garages, I used to look at the media side and think, they're a bit ridiculous. You know, they don't do any hard work. And it's us that does the hard work. And we used to call them the cake eaters.
The cake eaters.
All they did, we thought, was eat cake. You know, it was eat cake and drink champagne. And then there I was, a cake eater. But I loved it, you know, and what... Oh, shit. I'm so sorry. That's so unprofessional. Look at that. Oh, my goodness. That is terrible.
Do you want to tell us who that was?
Now you have to tell us who it is.
I can only apologise for that. Years in the business and I still can't turn the phone off.
Don't worry.
Don't edit it out. Leave it in. It's fine. So I got to the end of that and realised that what I had to offer that a lot of other people in the media side of Formula One didn't have, to the same level at least, was that inside perspective, you know, of 10 years in the sport. And if you think about all the TV production and radio production around Formula One at the time, anyone who wasn't just an outright presenter, who was a guest on a show or a pundit or whatever, was a driver or an ex-driver, you know. So I felt strongly that the sport only ever had the perspectives of the drivers, a little bit like what we were saying earlier, the stars of the show. But there was so much more to Formula One that I knew beyond that I was convinced that people at home would really benefit from learning.
Yep. And
so I made it my mission from that day to go ahead and try and make sure that I continued this. My phone's going again. So I'm going to turn it off.
You're good.
So yeah, I made it my mission from that day forward to really pursue a career. Having had the career or the opportunity land on my lap, from that day forward, I switched it to me chasing it and making sure that I would be able to continue in it because I just loved it so much.
And then for any aspiring cake eaters here, you know, tell us like, how do you go about live broadcasts? What do you think makes for a successful broadcasting career in motorsport?
Definitely turn your phone off. Well, I think, look, I get a lot of people now because I run my own podcast and I get a lot of people come to me and ask me that kind of question and not just around Formula One, but generally. And I always say, you've got to have something that you're passionate to talk about. You've got to have something to say. And it seems obvious, but you've got to have a reason to be doing it. Because if you've not got something to share, people are going to see through. It's not going to be authentic. You know, it's no point in just regurgitating what someone else has told you. You've got to have a passion, I believe, that you want to share. So I had that. And then you've got to figure out a way that you want to tell it in an interesting and inspiring way. I mean, if you think about it, you think about all the YouTube videos you watch or the podcasts you listen to. Why do you listen to them? Some of it is content, but a lot of it is how it's presented to you. Is it in short, you know, easy chunks that you can take in? Is it entertaining? Is it funny? Is it, you know, you think about the way you want to hear that content being broadcast. And I guess my take on all of that was I had the thing that I was passionate about, and I was really passionate about why I wanted to share it because I believed that it was a side of the sport that wasn't being covered. And then the way I decided to do it myself was just to try and honestly be myself as best possible. Because I believe that passion shows through. It speaks for itself almost. I didn't have to try and pretend to be somebody I wasn't, or I didn't have to come up with it sort of, you know, extra long, clever words to say it. I just wanted to get the passion out there. And I hope that's part of what has helped me to become successful in that field.
Yeah. And do you think Formula One is taking the right steps in the future, whether it's their carbon emission projects that they're trying to bring in, new initiatives? What is your perspective on that?
Yeah, it's a really interesting time, I think, if you're a Formula One fan or if you're even working or involved in the sport, because it is changing. And I mean, if you go back, I don't know, 10 years to the end of the Bernie Ecclestone era, whenever it was, you know, you looked at it then and it was huge, right? It had hundreds of millions of fans all around the world. It would be easy. And I think I looked at it back then thinking, how on earth can this grow any bigger? This is massive. And then Liberty Media come along and they make all these decisions, which a lot of people in the beginning thought, well, why are they doing these things? Changing the logo, the theme tune, you know, you can't come along and do that. But actually what they've done is proven to be successful, hasn't it? And they've tapped into this new marketplace of younger people, different areas of the world, tapping into new marketplaces. And the future, I still think, has loads of opportunity. They're obviously the American side of things is still getting bigger, seemingly. The Drive to Survive has been massive. But what I'm really excited about is the technical side, because, of course, that's where I started in all this, how that evolves. And we're going to these sort of sustainable fuels as a technology. And what I'm always excited about with Formula One is when you put any technology into the hands of the Formula One engineers and say, right, off you go, it just accelerates that development at such a rapid pace, way quicker than the rest of the world can do it. And so I firmly believe that we're going to go down a route with this fuel thing, and it could well not just revolutionize F1, but it could revolutionize the world. And what's most interesting about that is Formula One, this environmental sustainability challenge could be like an existential challenge for Formula One. It could be a threat, like it could bring it down. We race gas-guzzling cars all over the planet. We're flying thousands of people all over the place with equipment as well. And you could look at that and say, there's no way you can carry on doing that, because at some point the environmentalists are going to just shut you down. But Formula One have taken what could be their biggest threat and potentially turned it into one of their biggest opportunities. And I love that. So I'm really excited to see where that goes.
Incredible. That's Q1.
Yeah.
Verdict, Teddy?
That was a purple?
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 All right.
Yeah,
right away.
Exactly. Right away. Started
Through
strong.
to Q2.
Yeah, go
You
for
happy
it.
about that?
Yeah.
All right. Let's do it.
All right. Well, Q2's coming up with Marc Priestley. Stay tuned.
We want to give a big shout out to Waterboy for sponsoring this podcast. Swish, why don't you tell us more about Waterboy?
Yeah, Waterboy's pretty cool. We found out about this brand pretty recently, but we've been using it quite actively. Comes in multiple flavors. It's a hydration recovery mix for you. What does that even mean, though? It means if you are the type of person to go a little bit too hard, perhaps on Friday and Saturday.
We had moments like that.
We have moments, but also with the Christmas holidays coming around, I know a lot of you might be looking to party. You might be looking to hang out with family, get a little bit tipsy. This is the best recovery for you. It's not, again, 100% cure, but it's pretty damn close to one. And the coolest part, I think, about Waterboy is that 0 sugar.
Wow.
Which is pretty great. A lot of drinks out there, they stack up a bunch of sugar, which makes you crash even harder. But thankfully not with Waterboy. There's 3 times more electrolytes than Liquid IV in Waterboy.
Wow.
And 9 times more electrolytes than Gatorade in Waterboy as well.
I don't even like Gatorade.
I don't like Gatorade either. But it's incredible to see that with Waterboy, it's very easy. You take the mix, put it into water, stir it up, drink it. And honestly, again, you're not guaranteed to feel normal right away. But whenever I've taken it, I felt a lot better than when I haven't taken it before.
So no hangovers.
No hangovers, which is pretty
okay.
great. And so you can go back to literally just being yourself the next morning, and you don't need to kind of face those Sunday scaries anymore.
Hundreds of thousands of people already trust Waterboy as their hangover cure. It's time to stop dealing with that anxiety alone. For a limited time, my listeners get an exclusive 15% off discount with our link at waterboy.com/tlimits. That's 15% off at waterboy.com/tlimits.
It's time to ho hydrate this holiday season. Welcome back to the Track Limits podcast. We're here with Marc Priestley. Marc, we're now going to get into Q2. And in Q2, we want to dive a little bit deeper into you as a professional. So walk us back. You're growing up. Where do you go to college, university? What do you study? Was Formula One even on your mind as a career path?
So initially not, and I'll go back even before education, because I grew up in a place in Kent in the UK, right next to where the circuit Brands Hatch is. Do you know Brands?
No.
So Brands Hatch is Silverstone's the biggest circuit. Brands Hatch is the other one. And in the 90s, I think 80s and 90s, I'm not sure. Back then, when I was a kid, they used to alternate the British Grand Prix between Silverstone and Brands Hatch. So effectively, I was this kid in a tiny little sleepy village in Kent, and then Formula One came to my village, and hundreds of thousands of people descended on us. The cars parked down every bit of road, and it was amazing. And of course, back then, the sound of Formula One cars you could hear for miles. So I had no choice but to sit up and take notice of Formula One rather than having to go search for it. So that's probably where the first little spark of interest came. And because I was so close, one of my friend's houses, the end of his garden backed onto the edge of the boundary of the Brands Hatch circuit. So occasionally we used to sneak under his fence, get into the racetrack, and not on a Grand Prix weekend, but, on a test day. And we'd get in there and we'd be in, almost at the edge of the circuit, hiding behind tyre barriers, but watching these cars this close to us, and hearing the noise. And So I was absolutely captivated.
Teams should have paid you to be like a
Yeah,
photographer.
Yeah, I mean, we got thrown out. I remember one day I was in there watching, doing exactly that, and I'd ridden on my bike to my mate's house, climbed under his fence. We were watching the cars go around, and obviously we got spotted.
Oh no!
They red flagged the session and sent a recovery truck out to come and pick us up, and they stuck us in the back of this truck. There were 3 of us, and then took us all the way to the main entrance and just chucked us out. And the worst thing was my bike was still at my mate's house, which is like the other side of the village. So we had to walk all the way around to get back to the bikes. But that's where the interest came from. And then I kind of parked it. I didn't think of it as a career for many years after that. And I went down a route of actually studying A-levels in things like art and graphic design. And it was halfway through that, I had this sort of epiphany. I can't remember where it came from, but I sort of thought about this idea that, like, why can't I work in this industry? I was still obsessed with Formula One. Why can't I do it? You know? And I actually thought about it more and more, and I realised there was an engineering course at the same college that I was at studying art and graphic design. And I actually went home one night and I spoke to my parents. I sat them both down and had this really nervous moment where I had to talk to my dad and say, I'm thinking of ditching my A-levels and completely switching. And I was imagining his reaction would be disastrous. Yeah. But actually, you know, he could see how passionate I was about it. And he said, yeah, look, go for it. So I switched courses. And from that day forward, everything, and I mean everything, was focused on getting to Formula One. And from that day, I started sort of doing bits of free work experience, just offering to help make tea and sweep floors and do all of those old school apprenticeship type things just at weekends and school and holidays. And but in the meantime, I was writing letters to every single Formula One team. And at that point, I had no experience. There was no way a Formula One team was going to give me any job, but I was still writing. And every kind of month, I'd get the 10 letters back, rejection letters from each Formula One team. I've still got them all, got a stack of them, this big at home. And they'd all come back saying, you haven't got the right experience or whatever. And so I'd go away over time, over the next couple of years, trying to get that experience. And I'd offer my services to different teams in Formula Ford and various other things, until eventually I'd go back and they'd run out of excuses to say, because I had the experience now. And I worked my way up through the sort of motorsport categories and got to Formula 3 and then Formula 3000, which was the next level down from Formula 1. And after just years and years of writing these letters, McLaren wrote back and just said, do you want to come in? I think I pissed them off so much that eventually they were like, for God's sake.
We can't take more letters.
Yeah. Exactly. We're running out of paper, So they said, do you want to come in for an interview? And probably the best day of my life.
Incredible.
Yeah.
And that's amazing. And now that you're a presenter for Wheeler Dealer, I love that name, by the way. It's such a sick TV show name. How did that opportunity come for you? And then the next question would be, what's it like being on that show?
Well, it is amazing. That's the first thing, because all of this stuff that we've talked about, although Wheeler Dealers isn't around motorsport, it's cars, more generally cars. Of course, all of that motorsport stuff is still anchored at cars. It's the cars and the technology that I loved most of all. So it's amazing. So the opportunity came around because there's a couple of steps before that, but off the back of doing my presenting for Formula One and Formula E, the reporting stuff, I got an opportunity with Discovery Channel, who approached me they had this idea for a show. It was called Driving Wild, and it was probably the best gig of my life. The show was, so you can imagine, I said yes before they'd even finished the sentence, right? The show was, we want to take you all around the world, some of the most amazing places, and in these incredible places, we're going to drop you into this sort of weird motorsport culture, and then you're going to build a team from the local community.
Oh, wow. We're
going to build a car or a vehicle to take part in an event, and then you're going to drive the vehicle in the event.
Cool.
So we went to Sweden to do rallying, built a rally car and rally team. Yeah. We went to Thailand to do long-tail boat racing, which is these tiny little boats, not much bigger than an ironing board with a V8 engine on the back. Ridiculous things. Yeah. We went to South Africa and did car spinning, which is sort of donuts and things in an arena to music. We went to Cuba to do drag racing with the old 1950s cars. So you can see it's amazing, right? It's an incredible opportunity. So that was all about motorsport, but it was for Discovery Channel. And then after that, Discovery, that went really well. Discovery then approached me after that to start working on this Wheeler Dealers project. And although it wasn't motorsport, it is cars, which I love. And I've been doing it now for, I think, nearly 3 years. And I love it. And it's probably I mean, you've got Top Gear and you've got Wheeler Dealers as the two biggest car shows in the world. I mean, it goes to 200 million people plus around the world, which is an insane number of people. And so I'm just truly grateful to have that opportunity to be able to do these things, and have, like I said, I was racing a car around a track today for the show, and I'm getting paid to do that. And I will, as I said earlier, I'll never take that for granted. That's a pinch me moment every time I get to do it.
And I think my favorite episode is the one where you guys did the red Porsche in that barn.
Oh yeah.
That was amazing.
One of my favorite cars we've done on the show.
Yeah.
I really wanted to buy that car at the end of it, but they wouldn't let me.
It's not part of the signing contract or anything.
Yeah. So yeah, it's been an unbelievable journey. That part of it, I said the bit of getting to Formula One was utterly planned.
Yep.
I was laser focused on it, and I had a structure and a plan to get there, and I worked through that plan until eventually that dream came true. But the second part of all this career, there was no plan.
Yep.
And I still not got a plan, and it's just it's all stemmed from, essentially what I tell kids that I speak to and students. It was the hard work in the beginning of getting to Formula One, which I'm still benefiting from now. Because without that part of my career, none of this stuff would be happening today. So, and that was a lot of hard work. That was some serious effort and focus and dedication and all those things. So it definitely wasn't easy, but I'm now reaping the rewards. I'm still working hard and putting a lot into this. I will never stop doing that. But it was, it was 30 years ago when I made that decision and made that focused attempt to get to Formula One, which was the foundation for all of this.
And we love the F1 2022 game. We both sim race at home, and we played a lot. I also remember the previous games we had Jeff, rip Jeff, but Jeff was great. Tell us how that opportunity even comes about. Because you have a great voice, but how do they, reach out and say, Mark, we're going to have you be the voice of the engineer?
Have you started shouting back at me?
Oh,
enough of that. That's what I get on Twitter.
Times I'm like, what are you talking about?
Yeah. Every day on Twitter, that's what I get. Stop telling me to stop for tires.
That or it's I just overtook someone and they're telling me you didn't. I'm like, wait, where do you?
Yeah, I know how I shout at myself when I play it, so I get it.
Are you okay, mate? Turn the engine off and whatever.
Well, that came about because during lockdown, when we weren't traveling, we weren't filming, I threw everything into my YouTube channel for that period of time. So I was looking for people to interview and make videos with, and I found the creative director of the game online.
Nice.
Sort of tracked him down and asked if I could make a video about the game because I've been playing it a lot, and we did that. And we stayed in touch, and over the next couple of years, he then got in touch with me last year to say, look, we're looking to revamp the game completely, and we want to get a really authentic, we want someone who's actually worked in the sport to do the role. And again, it was one of those things I didn't need him to finish the sentence before I said, yes, of course I want to do it, So that's how it came about. And then what I did was last year, we recorded the F1 22 game, which was the full revamp. I mean, I did something like 30,000 lines of VO in a studio. I forget the number, but something like that, because it was every line from, it's like Lewis Hamilton's 0.1 second ahead, Lewis Hamilton's 0.2 seconds ahead, and every one of that, and then Lewis Hamilton's 0.1 second behind. And the whole, but for every driver and all the F2 drivers, and then it's all the other strategy stuff. And honestly, there is so much you would not believe. So it was a lot of sitting in a recording booth, just monotonous reading these lines. And last year we didn't have time to sort of really revamp the script. So it was pretty much the same script that we redid in my voice with a couple of changes. This year, we've actually just finished doing the 23 game. And we've had much more of an opportunity to change it and put my stamp on it and hopefully make it as real as it can be. So it's saying things that I know you would say because I've been there. And we've even done things like we switched it to a proper engineer's headset, right? An F1 engineer's headset. So instead of having a proper studio mic where the sound is really clean, it's now that authentic sound.
Radio kind of sound,
And I even asked them to play, not that you can hear it in the game, but they play the sound of an F1 car going around a circuit into my ears, so that because I feel you just raise your voice a little bit, and that's what you would be doing at the racetrack. So although you'll never hear that at home, hopefully the sound, it's all these little details that I think will just add to that authentic experience from a game player's point of view.
So excited. I am so excited.
Anything else you can tell us about the game?
I can tell you, actually, there's a couple of little sort of Easter eggs, because what they can do is when you record lines, they can then give that line a score as to how frequently it will turn up in the game. Right, so some of them you hear all the time. They're the ones that you scream at me about.
Yep.
But there's others that are really rare. So like if you win the championship, which doesn't happen very often, there's a couple of celebration lines, for example, end of season lines when you cross the line for the last time at the end of the season. And there is one which I did, which I thought was funny. I don't know if it'll ever show up in anyone's game. It's going to be registered quite low as a probability. But if you've come last in the season, had a terrible season, the line that was written was something like, not to worry, it can only get better from here. Bring the car back to the pits and I'll see you in the garage.
That's so humbling.
So we did that one and we did a couple of others. But then I said, look, just open the mic and let me do another one. And so they opened the mic and I just said something along the lines of, mate, that was awful. You've not only let me down, you've let yourself down. Your family are probably never going to speak to you again. Just get the car back here and we'll go again.
I'm going to come dead last now just so I can find out if that line is in there. Yeah.
But there's a few of those dotted through the game, that will crop up every now and again. So that's been a lot of fun.
The countdown begins.
I love it. June, right? Or July?
I don't know if we've got an exact date. It's around then.
Something around there.
Yeah.
Cool.
Oh man, that's amazing. And outside of that, you mentioned that you have a podcast show and you're kind of writing a book, a second book. Can you talk to us about that? Give us a sneak peek.
Do you know, I'm really excited about this, and I'm very lucky that I love all these things that I've talked about. I love them all. But the podcast is something that, again, started during lockdown because I had time. And I started doing the podcast. And basically what I do now in a lot of my time is talk about to the corporate world, like I said. So I go around the world talking to businesses about how they can improve sort of using an F1 mindset to get their team stronger and all these kind of things. And I quickly realised, having done that for a few years, and I spent a lot of my time doing this, but it is all corporate. I realised that the same messages kind of apply to everybody. And particularly people at home, and often during lockdown particularly, we all faced all these challenges on a personal level. How do you motivate yourself? How do you achieve that thing that you really want to do but you keep putting off? And it's all these things that I know because we've studied it in Formula One, and during my years in McLaren, I was quite at the forefront of us embracing this idea of sort of human performance. And that's not just the physical side of it, it's the mental side, it's learning to work with others, it's all this stuff, that everything that we could do to improve the performance of the humans that make up the team, like all of them, we started to embrace and looked at it from a scientific perspective. So I have this wealth of knowledge, and I've gone on to study that immensely since because I was fascinated by it. So the podcast is really translating those messages for anyone at home. So if you're a parent, and you're struggling with your kids, there are things that Formula One has taught me that I know can help in that situation. It's helped me, certainly, and it may well help you. So it's this corporate message translated to just the individual, and lots of things to help you overcome the challenges of life, whether it's financial, emotional, relationships. It's kind of a self-help podcast, but all centered around Formula One. So every message is somehow linked to Formula One. So it can be anything, but it's, I use pit stops as a great example of teamwork and dealing with, working under pressure. And everyone's facing all of those challenges in different ways all the time. So that's the podcast, and I still continue it now. We're about 6 seasons in, and really enjoying it. And the book that I'm writing now, which is still in early phase, I'm only on chapter 2, but it's the kind of the book of the podcast. So it's the book of all of those messages, really, written and explored even further. So there's a lot of research I'm doing at the moment, really exploring the sort of modern take on a lot of these challenges and techniques to just, I guess, improve your life. If you want to improve your life, Formula One, or thinking like a Formula One team would about the challenges, I think can really help.
Do you have a working title for that book?
Well, the podcast is called Pit Lane Life Lessons.
Yes. Cool.
So the working title for the book is that as well.
Fantastic.
Pit Lane Life Lessons.
And then when it comes to, being in a paddock and having that experience, like you've had, what is some of the most memorable or fun moments you've ever had at a race weekend? Can you tell us one or two, preferably if they have not been told
shared
before? That'd be great.
I mean, there's so many, and I have told quite a lot of them. But I mean, the obvious ones are the big wins and the big successful moments on track, because there's so much that goes into that. And so winning the championship with Lewis, and particularly the way it happened, if you remember, in 2008.
Brazil, right?
Brazil,
That's
most
iconic.
incredible finish. It was just amazing. To be on the right side of that was amazing, and I fully appreciate the guys at Ferrari were on the other side of that, and that is a heartbreaking moment. And we experienced that the year before, in 2007, missing out by a point or so. So I've seen both sides of that. So the highs are really high and the lows are really low.
Right.
Because you're fully invested when you're in a Formula One team. It's not just a job.
Yep.
It's your whole life, you know. But actually, the really fun parts are the people that I worked with, the team that you're part of, which is not just a team of colleagues. You spend your life with them. You travel the world, so you live with them for 8 months of the year or beyond. So they become almost like your family. And so you have the same incredible moments that you all have with your families and your friends, because that's where they are. But we're having those moments in amazing places in the world and in these unusual situations. So I had a lot of fun with Kimi, grew very close to Kimi over the years. I worked with him for a long time. And I mean, a lot of the stories are documented, particularly in my first book. But I've had some amazing parties with Kimi, as you can probably imagine. I mean, I remember one night in Australia, where we'd all been out together but ended up back at Kimi's hotel suite. And he had this incredible suite, the sort of penthouse suite in this amazing hotel. And there was me and a couple of my mates and him and a bunch of his mates who we all knew, all ended up back in this hotel. And it must have been 4 a.m. And some point around then, someone decided they would order, because breakfast was open, so let's order, 10 fried breakfasts or English breakfast. So by about 5 a.m, we're still going. We've been drinking all night, heavy partying. This lady turns up at the door with a trolley with 10 full English breakfasts on, right? And pushes it in. And there's all these idiots just leaping around drunk. And anyway, probably 30 seconds after she'd gone, the first fried egg was taken off the plate and thrown. Oh no! And this almighty food fight just broke out. And I'm not kidding. I don't know how much this hotel room must have cost, but it was trashed.
Yeah.
And there was food everywhere. Every one of those breakfasts ended up being ammunition. And I remember the last thing, it must have been 6 a.m. and I had to go to catch a flight home. Yeah. The last thing I remember is seeing Kimi curled up in the corner with his laptop as a shield. As baked beans and sausages rained down upon him.
Nice.
Not even a pillow.
No, just a laptop. Yeah.
So that was, and there was a lot of that stuff, and I think he had to pay to redecorate the hotel room afterwards the next day.
It's probably worth it, honestly. It sounds like an incredible memory.
Yeah, exactly. So we had some great times, and actually again with Kimi, he used to take us away at the end of every season. We became friends as well as colleagues. So we used to go on holiday together with, again, our mates and his mates became this one group. So we had some amazing moments where, we'd go up to Lapland, for example, and he'd send a private jet over to pick us up. Wow. We'd all pile on the jet and it would just be a big party out there. And then he'd rent this house with snowmobiles. And I mean, it's just the sort of thing that I'm never going to be able to do those things in my life, just me. So to dip into this world of the sort of multi-gazillionaire rock star racing driver, was a magical experience, and I'll never, again, fully appreciate it, never forget it. So there's a lot of that. But also, the other things, when we got later in my time, it was very much a party atmosphere in the my early years, where there was a lot of money from the tobacco-sponsored era. Oh, yeah. There was no such thing as a mobile phone and social media, so you could kind of get away with a lot, and we did, and we had a lot of fun. But then towards the end, where it got a bit more serious, so did Formula One. And actually, I really embraced that. So this, like I said, this sort of human sports science, human performance science. And Lewis came into Formula One at exactly that time, really, when we were really at the pioneering forefront of that at McLaren. And he, you can imagine, fully embraced that. So I loved delving into the science and the nuance of of how you can get the best out of everything and everybody with somebody like Lewis, because he was as curious as I was about this. He had slightly different motivations, of course, from a driver perspective, but it was the same things we were learning. So as he was learning it, I was learning it, and I'd probably been a couple of years ahead of him, so I was able to teach him and help him learn this stuff more, and that was a really fascinating process as well.
Yeah. Last question. This is another hot take. If McLaren or like another F1 team would call you up right now and says, we need you in a leadership role right now in the team, would you take it?
I mean, I get asked this a lot. I never say never. I don't ever want to say no to anything. But I love what I do now, and the nice thing about what I do now is I get to work with lots of different people, and I've worked with Formula One teams in a consultancy role in the past. So when you're working with one organisation, yes, it's all focused on them, and I get it, and they're paying you, so of course that's what they want. But I love not only helping organizations and people around the world, but also learning from them. So I go into companies that are in any industry. They could be in the music industry or the finance sector or medical, pharmaceutical. And although there's a world away from Formula One, I go into them talking about Formula One, but I come away learning a lot about how they approach it. And I can then bring that back and apply it to Formula One or anything else. So Formula One is quite an enclosed business. And because it's elite and it's the very top of its game, there is sometimes, I think there's a little bit of an arrogance that no one could possibly do it better than Formula One. And I've probably felt that when I was in it as well. But now I've stepped away, I fully appreciate that actually everyone's got something to offer. And it doesn't have to be your industry. They don't even have to be the best. They might just have a different take on something or a different thought process. And that can lead you somewhere that can then lead to even great success. So that's what I love. So that's why I'm loving this sort of freelance world where I can go around the world talking to lots of people rather than focusing all of my efforts onto one person or one company.
And you have a lot of projects on the go right now, right? I mean, TV, you got the book, you have your podcast. It's incredible to see how you've actually just built a multi-hyphenate career and done that so well. And I love
that. I love that because it gives me opportunity. I mean, I love learning. I'm really fascinated. I loved it when I was in Formula One. I'd spend any time I had free at McLaren, I'd be in the R&D department, figuring out, learning what they were working on that might be coming down the line for the future, helping them, putting my take on it and my ideas. And I love that. So it's the learning I love. And to be able to do what I do now in all these different things, it's just working on the game. I'd have done it because it was a dream come true anyway. But I've now got this insight into the gaming world that I had no real idea about other than being an end user. And that's fascinating to me. So all of these things I take something from and I can then go and apply it and it may help someone else further down the line.
Any verdict?
I mean, that Kimi story was already purple.
I don't know if I've ever heard that, but that is incredible.
Oh, that was epic.
Purple again. All right.
Wow.
We're through to Q3.
Amazing.
Let's see if we can get pole.
This is the last
It'd be
point.
incredible.
Amazing.
We actually only recently have had one person have 3 poles in a row.
Wow.
So,
okay.
Pretty exciting. We'll be back for the rapid fire round with Marc Priestley. Welcome back to the Track Limits podcast. We're now getting into our final segment, Q3, the rapid fire round. Mark, are you nervous? Be honest.
Absolutely, yeah.
Rightfully so.
So we're going to go through a bunch of questions as rapid, as fire as possible.
Okay.
All right, here we go. First question. If you had to choose one platform to post on forever, which one would it be?
Instagram.
Okay.
Nice. Which one would you delete?
Snapchat.
Okay, cool. Which driver would you trust to drive you around the track blindfolded?
None of them.
None of them.
Absolutely none of them. No way.
Not even Kimi?
No.
Definitely not Kimi.
Definitely not Kimi.
For audio listeners, I'm about to show you a photo. This is of you and Checo beside the car. Do you remember this? And what do you think of Checo?
What do I think of Checo? That's hilarious. What do I think of Checo? I have a lot of time for Checo. Yeah. I think he's a great guy. He's in a bit of a spot at the moment, isn't he? Because he's up against Max, and no one yet has really fared very well against Max. So I hope he doesn't come out of this, tarnished. Mm-hmm. That's what I'd hope.
Cool. You already talked about the greatest driver of all time. It's hard to answer. I'm not going to give you that. Just give me, who's your favorite driver who you enjoy watching as a fan?
Lewis, still. Cool. Still enjoy Lewis because he's so dedicated and he's had such longevity, and that didn't happen by accident. So I have total respect for that.
Amazing. What technical directive would you institute in 2026 with all the new regulations coming in?
I would. There's one that I would love to implement, and we've had all these restrictions in Formula One, which have, over the years, they've often been based around cutting back costs, haven't they? We've sort of banned materials, or we've banned ideas like active suspension or whatever it is to keep costs down. Well, now we've got a cost cap in place. Mm-hmm. So I would just say, do whatever you want, as long as you don't spend more money than the cost cap.
Oh, I like that.
And how good would that be? Because it could generate some innovation. You could come up with ideas, and you then choose what you want to spend your money on. I'd love to see that.
It's like free game.
Yeah.
Just stay under that budget.
Yeah, I like that one.
Love it. Cool. If you were an F1 driver, what team would you pick?
McLaren.
McLaren.
Of
Okay,
course. Yeah.
What was I thinking?
Yeah.
Who would you want as a teammate, and who would you not want as a teammate
From the current
from the
grid.
current grid?
Yeah.
In current grids, I'd probably want Lewis as a teammate. I mean, it's a difficult one because as a teammate, typically in real world, teammates, you want someone who's a bit slower than you.
Of course.
So maybe in that basis, Lewis is not the perfect pick. But I think I'd learn a lot from him. So that's the reason for that. The one I wouldn't want, probably Max, because I think he's pretty ruthless as a teammate, and it's not just him on the track, it's having the team around him and behind him. And as I just said, as we've seen, you're onto a bit of a loser if you're Max's teammate, typically, aren't you?
What's the most over-asked question that you typically get?
Who's the greatest F1 driver of all time?
Yes, but we did ask that, didn't we? Now,
The answers are ready for us. We're good.
Or the other one is which is the best Grand Prix to go to?
Okay, good. Yeah, we don't have that.
No,
But which one is it?
Well, the answer is always depends how you look at it, because you can look at it like which is the best racetrack for racing.
Yep.
You know, things like Spa, amazing racetrack. Or the other way to look at it is what does it give you on a night out after you've been to the race? And Spa's rubbish. So,
There's nothing there.
so I look at it in both ways. You know,
Cool,
Monaco, Singapore, wonderful nights out.
Yep.
Terrible racetracks.
Got it. Yep.
What's one piece of F1 memorabilia you currently own or would love to own?
My prized possession. I have a few champagne bottles from winning champagne bottles, which are amazing. But I have a helmet that Kimi gave me. And it's amazing because it's Kimi's helmet, but even more amazing because he had this little inscription put on the back, and it's tiny, like you have to really search for it, but in the back it just says, "Thanks for everything, Elvis." And that is something special to me, you know. So that's my prized possession, yeah.
Beautiful. And tell us about the most embarrassing moment that you've had at a Grand Prix weekend.
Well, the most embarrassing for me, I touched on it earlier when I had my first opportunity to be a pit lane reporter, with the BBC. And I said to you, they gave me a microphone and a pack and said, off you go out into the paddock to just see who you can interview. I walked out of the doors from that office not knowing what I was doing. I barely knew how to work the thing, right? As I opened the door, not kidding, I bumped into, and I mean literally bumped into, Bernie Ecclestone.
Oh my God.
And he's there in front of me, and I bumped into him, and I had this moment in my mind where I could either just run away, which is what I really wanted to do, or like this is an opportunity. You know, you never get to speak to him. So I stopped him, put the microphone under his nose and said, "Bernie, have you got a moment?" And he said, yeah, he answered a couple of questions for me. I was so nervous. It was a terrible interview. I was shaking like a leaf. But after about a minute, someone tapped him on the shoulder and sort of dragged him away, and off he went into the distance. I was like, what? I just interviewed Bernie. And I was sort of quite pleased with myself, but shaking, so much. And I walked off down the paddock and I got halfway down, and then I got a tap on the shoulder, and it's Bernie Ecclestone. And he's come running after me, and he said, "Hey, son," he said, "I was really sorry. That was really rude of me." He said, someone called me away. He said, "Do you want to come and finish the interview?" And he took me into his motorhome, sat me down at a table, and gave me like a 5-minute interview, which was
legend.
No one gets that.
Yeah.
And I went back up to the office at the end of the day, and they were like, "Who'd you get?"
Believe or not.
And it still was a terrible interview. And I say embarrassing. It was only embarrassing from my point of view, because if I listen back, it's awful. But what an amazing moment. And, I took that opportunity, which I'm really proud of.
We got to find that clip now.
We need to find it. I also love that you took an embarrassing moment and made it a legendary moment.
Well, any of those things, and this is the same on anything I look back on from those very early days, whether it's me speaking on stage at an event or interviewing somebody, I look back on that and think it's terrible, and now I get on stage and I love it. I'm bouncing on stage. It's totally different. But back then I was looking at the floor. I'm really quiet and shy and terrified, shaking like a leaf. So it was embarrassing for me back in those moments, and I wanted to run away, but just by doing it over and over again, it's the same thing, isn't it? Practice, and you get better at it, you get more confident, and now I love it.
For sure.
Next up, if you can have one superpower, what would it be?
It would be to inflict the power of kindness onto people who are mean on social media. Like a little lightning bolt of kindness.
Can you actually imagine that? Like if on Twitter,
how good would
you
it
could
be?
literally just like react and just bam, it just changes. I'm sorry.
I hate it when people are unkind.
Yeah.
And you see it on social media so much.
the time.
And I've got kids now who are just embarking on their own social media journey, and I know what they will face at some point.
Yep.
So yeah, if I could just throw a switch and hit them with a lightning bolt of kindness, that'd be great.
Amazing. What celebrity would be a good fit to play an F1 driver in a movie? Or TV show?
I would. I mean, it might be a bit obvious, but someone like Tom Holland.
Okay.
Amazing.
Yeah.
I think it's got to be. Oh, do you know what? Rihanna.
Oh, all right.
Badass.
Yeah.
She's smoking hot.
Yeah.
She's cool.
Yeah.
That's what a Formula One driver is, right?
Love it.
So,
apparently she loves cricket.
Really?
Somebody was telling me that she came to a Durham cricket game.
Oh yeah.
Like a college, like a university cricket game. But anyways, I don't know.
Why not? Let's get a girl into Formula One. I think it's happening. It's going to happen.
Yep.
So let's get a role model in playing the role in the
Fantastic.
movie.
I agree.
Okay. Wildest prediction for this season?
Wildest prediction? Well, I mean, the obvious prediction is that I think we know the answer to the obvious prediction. So the wildest one, Fernando Alonso is going to win a race.
Yes, lovely.
Okay.
Fingers crossed.
Yes,
Hopefully
we
next
want
time.
it.
Hopefully next time. Final question was going to be about your autobiography, and we had a bunch of titles, but you've already written one. What I want to ask you is, Elvis Presley, Mark Elvis Priestley. Is there something there? Like, did your parents have a love for Elvis? Come on.
I mean, I hate to shatter the illusion. Elvis is not my real name. It's literally a nickname.
A nickname. Oh.
And it started when I was about 10 years old at school, and some bright spark in my class realised that Priestley sounded a little bit like Presley.
I knew it.
And because there were like a few Marks in the class, if someone shouted Mark, everyone turns around. So they gave me the nickname Elvis, and it stuck. And it stuck so much that I think most people in Formula One in that pit lane don't even know my name's Mark because everyone calls, even my wife only ever calls me Elvis.
Oh.
So it's only my mum that's left that doesn't call me Elvis anymore. She hates it because it's not the name she gave me.
Oh.
Incredible. We're going to title this episode Mark Elvis Presley.
Yeah.
I think that's perfect.
This is it.
Or Priestley, sorry. Presley. I was about to say Presley.
Maybe that's even better.
Thank you so much, Mark, for coming on.
Yeah.
My
At
pleasure.
the very start, we ask our guests within 30 seconds to share their career and what they're proud of. I mean, tell us about your legacy now. Like, what do you want to be remembered for? What do you want to leave behind within 30 seconds?
I mean, I don't have a real desire to be remembered in a certain way. The only thing I hope, and this is what everything I do now is kind of centered around, is that I'm helping, because I've learned and had a privileged existence in Formula One, and know how lucky I've been to live through, what happens in Formula One is you work with the very best people in every part of the industry. The R&D guys, the best. The technicians on the carbon fiber side, they're the best. Everyone's the best. And when you're surrounded by the best people all day long, the Adrian Newey's of this world, the Lewis Hamiltons, you can't help but learn from that. And it's a privilege to be able to learn. So all I hope is that I've been able, through what I'm doing now, to share some of that privilege with other people that don't have the same opportunity. So I hope that I can leave behind a bit of knowledge or learning and understanding that other people were never going to get that same opportunity to learn. Maybe that's the legacy.
Wow. Mic drop.
Pole?
That is a pole. that answer is a pole.
Pole position. Great job. Thank you again. Really appreciate the
My
time.
pleasure. I
here.
really
Thank
enjoyed it.
you.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Amazing.
If you guys enjoyed this episode, feel free to leave a review. Go check our other episodes out on tracklimitspod.com, and we will see you all in the next episode.